Morning. Well, it's time to talk about the document object model and JavaScript. So far what we've been doing when we're programming using JavaScript is we've been just writing straight JavaScript code and using either document.write or console.log or some kind of dialog box to interact with the user. But we've been doing it in kind of an ad hoc fashion, and I want to get to the heart of what JavaScript is really useful for, and that's manipulating the DOM or document object model. So DOM, we also call that's the DOM, document object model. So the big idea is that the DOM is really the HTML that makes up the document, makes up a web page. And that HTML, manipulating the HTML, we're actually able to manipulate the content, the structure of the content. We're able to manipulate the style as well, so we can manipulate the CSS. So basically what we're talking about is JavaScript can manipulate the HTML, the content inside any element tag in the HTML. It can move HTML elements around. It can also manipulate the CSS. And what's cool about the manipulation of the document object model is that it is browser neutral for the most part. And it's also, basically it's browser neutral. So if you write JavaScript and you run it in a Chrome browser, in theory, it should work in Firefox or Aloha or Microsoft Edge or whatever browser it is that you're using. So that's pretty cool. All right, so let's talk about a few components of the document object model. All right, so the way JavaScript views a document is it consists of a bunch of different objects. So the DOM is essentially objects with members and methods. And we can use those members and methods to manipulate the document object model. All right, so I want to talk about one really important object that gets used a lot, and that is the window object. All right, so you can access the window object directly in JavaScript by just saying window. So if you say window dot history, you can get the history of your browser activity. If you say navigator, you will get what browser you're using. If you say window.document, you will get the document object model for the web page you're viewing, which is another way of saying you'll get access to the HTML and CSS that exists on your web page. If you grab this document object, there are a number of members and methods that you can mess around with. Okay, so if you say document.write, then at the current position that you are in the document object model, you can write HTML effectively. .forms, this will give you a collection of all the forms that exist on the current web page. .anchors will give you a collection of all the, it'll give you a collection of all the anchors that exist on your web page. There's also dot child nodes. Let me just looks like my, hang on a second. Looks like we lost our, it's annoying. Hang on, get that back. Just dropped off for some reason. Okay, child nodes will get you access to all of the HTML nodes, which we're going to explain in a second. So there are chunks of the HTML that exist in the document object model that we can access. And we can get a list of the images on the web page as well. And this list goes on and on and on. You can Google this. There's just a ton of this, okay? The key is that this window object gives you access to chunks of the document object model in an organized way. All right, so let's talk about the document object model now. How does JavaScript view an HTML page, basically? So I'm going to give you a piece of HTML to consider. All right, so I'll write the HTML page here, doc type HTML, and we'll put a head in here, and we'll put a title. Okay, there's title. Oops, a little hello world, and title, close the head. Then we're gonna have a body, and we're going to create a form. Oops. And the name is equal to form. And wow, we're having a lot of problems here. Things dropping off. Let's get this back on again. Okay, the name is equal to form. And then we'll put an input tag, input type equals, let's say the type is equal to password. We'll just have something where you just type a password. Okay, and then we'll give this an ID of password, or name of password, so we can find it. Oops. Name equals password. So this is our password tag. And then we have an input type equals submit. Name equals submit. Value equals submit. And I think I can do that to close those inputs. And then I'm going to end my form here, end my body, and end the HTML. All right, so this is my HTML document. Now, how is that viewed? How is this viewed by JavaScript and the document object model? Well, I don't think it's going to come as a surprise to you, but there's kind of a hierarchy of how things are put together here. And it's based on elements that enclose elements. So this HTML is the sort of, it is the root element. So I'm going to draw that right here and just say HTML. That's the root. Now, springing off the root, we have a couple of other elements. We have a head element and we have a body element. So I can draw a tree. I've got a head element and I've got a body element. And then coming off the head element, I have a title element. Coming off the body element, I have a form element. And then coming off the form element, I have an input tag. And I have another input element. So the first input element is the password, and the second input element is the submit button. So this forms my document object model. And I can use JavaScript to navigate through the document object model in a variety of ways. I just remembered one thing that I want to do just as a modification here to make some of my subsequent examples work. And that is, I'm going to move this over here and add an ID to each one of these. So ID equals form. And I'm going to put an ID here equal to password. And an ID here equal to submit, just so that I can find these using some of the JavaScript document element retrieval methods. Okay, so JavaScript views the document object model as a hierarchy of elements embedded inside elements. There's a bunch of ways of accessing the elements in the hierarchy. So one way is to think of things as child nodes. All right, so I already talked about the fact that it's possible through window document child nodes to get a collection of child nodes. Well, if I were to get that collection, what I would get back is, since HTML is the root, the collection of child nodes would be head and body. But then from head and body, I can actually say, give me the child nodes of head. And if I do that, I would get title. For body, if I said, give me the child nodes of body, I would get form. For form, if I said, give me the child nodes of form, I would get input. The input for password and the input element for submit. So that's a nice way to navigate the hierarchy of the document object model. But there's other ways of grabbing stuff as well. And so I wanted to show you how you could do that. All right, so let's see. I'm going to take this and drag it down onto the next page. Whoops. Let's try that again. Because I want to talk about this a little bit. I want to talk about ways of accessing elements in the document object model. Okay, so here are some ways that I can access elements in the document object model. So mechanism number one. So in JavaScript code that I write, I could say var, let's say I wanted to go after I'm going to just label these. This is the password, and this is the submit button. Okay, so let's say I wanted to go after the password fields, like for example, because I wanted to write some code to check the password field. So how would I do that? Well, I could say, create a variable, call it password. I can call this variable anything I want, and I can say it's equal to document.forms sub 0. So if I do that, if I do form sub 0, that's going to get me access to the first form in the document. But as you can see, there's only one form in the document. So that's going to give me access to the form that I want, that first form. And then if I say dot element, I would continue this on the same line, dot elements sub 0. That would get me access to the first, element that's under form, under the first form, and that would be the password element. Okay. Let's say I wanted to get access to the submit button. So I could say var submit equals document dot forms sub 0 dot elements sub 1. Okay, cool. So that's one way. I can also get access to the element by name. All right, so here's mechanism number 2. Let's say I want to go after the submit button, because actually it's going to be useful to go after buttons, because you can set up event handler for buttons. So that's why I'm going to use buttons as an example. So I'm going to say var submit equals document dot form. So you can say form. This is the name of the form. And if you remember, I called the form, actually gave the form the name form. It's pretty unimaginative. And then I can also specify the name of the submit button, which was also submit. So this is the name of the submit button. All right. So those two actually, they're kind of cool. What you're doing is you're kind of structurally navigating the elements in the document object model, right? If I say document, I'm talking about this whole thing here. Document says, really, we're talking about the entire HTML document. If I say document dot form, that's going to get me to the form element. And then if I say dot submit, that's going to get me to the submit element. So I'm navigating the hierarchy of the document. But you can blow off the hierarchy and go after elements directly. And that's actually more common when you're programming using JavaScript. So you can just specify the name of the element, or the ID of the element. So I can say var submit equals document dot get element by ID, and I'm going to specify the ID of the element, and the element ID is submit, because that's how I specified it in the HTML for the element. So when I say ID submit, it's going to go directly to search. It's going to search all of the HTML elements in the HTML document, and it's going to find the one element, because you're only allowed to have one element with every element. If you give it an ID, has to be unique within the entire document. So it'll search for the document element that has the ID of submit. If we go back up to the actual HTML, we can see that I set up an ID of submit for the submit button. Okay, so we've got 3 ways of going after elements. Super cool. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about an example. Let's write a program that works with manipulating the document object model. All right, so here's what I would like to do. All right, so let's have a door chooser. All right, so we're going to have an HTML page that looks like this. Choose, whoa, that's cool. Maybe not that. Okay. Choose a door. And we're going to have door number 1, door number 2, and door number 3. Now, what's going to happen on the web page is if the user clicks on door number 1, we're going to see a pop-up box that says a new car with an OK button that you click to dismiss the alert. All right. If we pick door number 2, we're going to see a pop-up box that says a piece of toast. With an OK button. All right. And then finally, if you click door number 3, it's going to say nothing. You get nothing. Okay. So in order to get this to work, we're going to have to do something interesting, right? We're going to construct some HTML. The HTML that allows us to list these doors and in a list, in an unordered list with bullets next to them. And then we're going to register an event handler. When you click on any one of those list items, we're going to register an event handler that brings up a little dialog box that's different for each door. So I want to just make a point here. None of the code that makes any of this work is running in the backend on the Python web server. All of the code that makes this work is going to be running in the front end in JavaScript. So the JavaScript is going to be running on the web page, interacting directly with the HTML. So it'll be a very quick response when you do that. Okay, so let's get the HTML written. Now there's a bunch of ways of doing this. All right, so I'm trying to think here. The best way to do this is, I think what we'll do is we'll write this one by hand. And then what we'll do is, we'll write this one by hand. And then what we'll do is the next example, I've got a couple of other examples that we'll write using regular browser. Okay. All right, so here's the HTML. Choose a door. All right, so we're gonna, we'll have HTML in front of this, but in the body, we're gonna have this, choose a door. All right, so we're gonna do a list item, set the ID equal to door1. And we're gonna write some code here that says on click, choose door, and we'll pass in the value 1. Okay. And then we're going to do, and then we'll absolutely have to have the door, so we'll say door1 here. Then we're going to do ID equals door2. On click equals choose door2. And then ID equals door3. On click equals choose door3. Door3. And then we'll close our unordered list. All right. And the code will continue after that. Okay, but this is the basic structure that we're going to interact with using our JavaScript. Now, what is this on click choose door 1? Well, you're familiar from Java, working with Java, that you can create event handlers for elements that appear in a user interface you're creating. Well, you can create event handlers for any HTML element that exists on a web page. And so that's what I'm doing right now. This special tag that appears inside the list element says, when the user clicks on the door, I want you to call choose door 1. Call that JavaScript method. When the user clicks on door 2, I want you to call choose door 2. When the user clicks on door 3, I want you to call the method choose door passing in the value of 3. All right, now let's write the code for choose door. All right, so that's our HTML. Let's write the code for choose door. So the code for choose door works like this. Function choose door. And we're going to take as an argument a door. And we're just going to use a switch statement. So we're going to switch on door. And if we have case 1, we picked door 1, we're going to do an alert. And we'll say, a new car. A new car. And then we're going to break. Case 2, we have a delicious piece of toast. A piece of toast. And then break. And then case 3, we have nothing. Okay, and then we probably should, just to be good programmers, we should probably add a default here. And just do an alert that says error. We should never have this. But it's always good to have it. It's always good to have that default in there just in case. Okay, oops, I got to open a curly bracket here and close curly bracket there and close the curly bracket for the actual function. Okay, so that's our choose door method. All right, so this will work in a lovely fashion. However, I would say, well, I just want to make sure you understand where these pieces go. So this is that's your HTML. This is the JavaScript. The HTML is going to go in one file. We might call that door.html, like door.html. And the JavaScript might go in door.js. And the code for this JavaScript, you could put an external link. You could put an external link right here. Link to JavaScript here. So let's go back and go back through notes that we've done here. And let's see. I'm just trying to get the exact syntax of doing the link. Okay, so what we would do is we would have something that looked like this. I'm gonna grab this. Copy, and we'll go all the way back down here to our code, and we'll paste. And I'm just gonna shrink this. Okay, getting a little messy here, but Okay, so we're going to have a script type that says script type text JavaScript, source equals, and I'm going to change that source. Source is going to be door.js. Okay. And then we'll do a close script. And that will go right where it says link to JavaScript here. All right, so the HTML is now linked to door.js. And when the user clicks on door number 1, that will call choose door 1, which will then invoke the function door 1 in JavaScript. And we will invoke case 1, do the alert, and a new car dialog box will appear. And the user can click OK. All right, so that's kind of exciting. But I will have to say that this is actually kind of a crappy way of having JavaScript interact with HTML elements. The reason for that is that we're violating that separation of concerns. Okay, so I'm going to just show you what I mean in red. This code right here is mixing JavaScript with HTML. We don't want to do that, right? That's not good programming style. We want to separate the content from the manipulation of the content. So we're going back to that, maybe the idea of the model view controller, right? The view that we're displaying and the controller, the thing that can manipulate the view, those are two separate things. So I don't want JavaScript code to appear in my HTML. If you can imagine that if this JavaScript code was generated by Python in the back end, now your Python code has to not only generate the HTML, but also generate some special JavaScript code to stick in the HTML. That's bad news. What would be much better is if the Python code didn't really know anything very much about the JavaScript code that was being run on the front end. And so all the Python code was responsible for doing was generating HTML. And then if you wanted to write some JavaScript to manipulate that HTML, well, you can do that separately. So you keep the Python separate from the JavaScript. And that's a good idea. That's good separation of concerns. So could we still have this behavior of being able to click on doors, list items, and be able to get those alert boxes without embedding JavaScript in the HTML? And the answer is, you bet we can. We can do that. Actually, we can do that a couple of ways. So the key is we have to find a way of linking door with the JavaScript, the door list elements with the JavaScript event handlers. All right, so let's take a look at how we can do that. So we're going to talk about how to register event handlers. Okay. All right. So option number 1 is in HTML. All right, so we just did this, but I just want to make sure, I'm just going to call it out again. So I would say list element ID equals door1 on click. Oh, this is actually a super cheesy way. On click equals alert a new car. So this is even more direct than what we just did. Okay, so that's really bad, right? We're putting JavaScript directly in the HTML, so that's bad. Okay, here's option number 2. Oh, I see how I did this. Okay, so in HTML direct. So we're just doing the code directly. So in HTML, indirect. So this is where we make a call to a JavaScript function, but we don't actually run the JavaScript code directly from the HTML. So we're still using the onClick, which is a bad idea, equals, and we're going to say, what do we call this method here? Choose door. Okay, onClick, choose door. Still not great. Okay, so that's still not great. Okay, another cool way that we can do this is we can say, using onSubmit. Okay, so this is done in, we're registering an event handler, but we're doing it inside JavaScript. So there's no code in the HTML that has any JavaScript in it, which is awesome, except for the link to the door.js file. Okay, so what would that look like? That would look like this. We're going to say in JavaScript, document dot get element by ID door 1. So that will get us the door 1 element. And if you say dot on submit, that says get me the event handler for a click on the door. So if you click on the door, this event handler will get executed. And we're going to say that's equal to choose door. Okay. Now, there's a little bit of a problem, and that is that the way this is set up, oh, I'm sorry, this shouldn't be on submit, it should be on click. Choose door. Now, the problem with this is that we need some way, this is you have to pass in the name of the JavaScript event handler that you want to use, but you can't pass in any arguments to the name. So I can't do choose door 1. That's not good. So what I'm going to do instead is just pass in choose door, and then I'm going to use a technique inside the choose door method to identify which door I'm choosing. So I'm just going to repeat this for the other event handlers. So I'm going to have three of these, and I'm going to have choose door 2 and choose door 3. All right, so each one of those I'm registering. The onClick event handler is going to be the JavaScript method choose door. Now I wrote the choose door method up here, which does the switch, but I'm actually going to modify it slightly, just slightly, and it'll work out great. So this choose door method is not quite what I need in order to get this last option to work. Now, I want to talk about these three options that we have for a second before I spend a little bit more time talking about the it's not the onSubmit, it's the onClick event handler. Okay, so let's talk about this. So here we go. All right. Oh, right. So comparing these three different ways, we've got two ways in here that are kind of bad. All right. If we do these onClicks, we're embedding JavaScript in HTML. We don't want to do that. If we do these document registrations of event handlers, those are great because we're putting that code in our JavaScript code, and that means that the HTML that we're using is going to look very different. All right, so let's take a look at what the HTML version 2 would look like. We can take the old HTML and I'm just going to rewrite it. So this is the second version of HTML, assuming that we're using registration of the event handlers in JavaScript. So the new HTML is going to look like this, and you're going to agree with me, I'm sure, it just looks much nicer. So here we go, paragraph, choose door. And here's our unordered list. Here's our list item 1. Whoops, we have to give our ID. ID equals door 1 and door 1. Notice I don't have any JavaScript here. ID equals door 2. This is much nicer. Door 2. So I'm just letting the HTML do HTML stuff. Door 3. And we're going to have the JavaScript stuff do JavaScript stuff. Okay, so that's my HTML. Now, the JavaScript is also going to look super clean and neat. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this code right here. So I'll write it up here. So this is the JavaScript that we're going to have. So we're going to take the code that's right up here, and we're going to embed that right in the JavaScript file. So this first part of the JavaScript file is going to be a set of instructions to basically register the event handlers. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to write the event handler. And the event handler looks a little bit different from the original event handler that we have up here. Whoops, up here. This event handler up here required door as an argument to choose door. But I just said that when you register event handlers in JavaScript, when you register event handlers in JavaScript, you can't specify an argument to choose door. You just have to have the name of the event handler. So somehow inside choose door, it would be really cool if we could discern which door we had, door 1, door 2, and door 3. And it turns out there's a very easy way to do that. Okay, so here we go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to write a new method, which is called choose door. So a replacement method for choose door. So function choose door, and we're going to do a switch. Now the thing about this choose door is there's no argument being passed in, which is great. That makes it compatible with these event handlers that we're registering, which do not provide arguments. All right, but we are going to switch on something that will allow us to figure out which door we're on, because when choose_door gets invoked, it's invoked as an event handler. And if we say this.id, that'll give us the ID of the element that is triggering the event. And then we can say case door 1, and then we'll do an alert, a new car. And break. So pretty similar to the previous choose_door, except we're doing, instead of doing a case on a 1, we're doing a case on the ID of the door. Case door 2, alert, toast, break. I'm trying to get a little bit more space here. Case door 3, and we're going to do an alert. You get nothing for door 3. And then break. And then default. Alert. Unknown element. This.id. Break. We don't really need the break there, but I'll leave it anyway. Okay. So slightly different choose_door, but very useful. Okay. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to do a few more examples. So what we're going to do is an example for a movie ticket website. And then we're going to do an example. Well, maybe we'll do the, we're going to do like a user ID password checker. And then we'll do the movie ticket website. Okay, awesome.